Okay, Chris Speaks here today with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast, and we got 6th District Congressional GOP candidate Case Dixon. Case, how are you, man?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Good, buddy. Hey, so I tell you what, why don't you just take a moment and kind of introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I'm a congressional candidate here for District 6 in Alabama. I'm a father of two beautiful daughters under the age of 2, married to my wife of Caroline for almost 3 years. I currently work full time in home health physical therapy, and I was inspired to get involved in politics really after the birth of my first daughter. I realized I was doing a disservice to them. I've always paid attention to politics and known what's going on, but never formally got involved. And so I felt like I was doing a disservice to them and my family for not shaping their future and trying to hedge some protection around their future and make sure that it's secure. And so that's what motivated me to step up. Um, yeah, I mean, several people have asked me why did I decide to run for U.S. Congress and not some local position to kind of work the ladder and work my way up. But I don't want to be a career politician. I want to be someone that goes in, makes a change, and goes back to doing what I like to do, which is working with patients in home health care. And so there were things that I felt like I could make a difference in at the federal level. And so I don't want to spin my wheels. And that's why I decided to run for this office.
Case, you're running against Gary Palmer, who's an entrenched incumbent. What extra challenges does that place in front of you, having to run against somebody who's already there and, already has a donor base and has money in the bank?
I think the better question would be, what challenges will I not be facing? Right. I think there's so many challenges whenever you're facing an incumbent. Obviously, the money, the name ID, the donors, the familiarity. I mean, everything. I mean, so it's more so what type of challenges are not in front of me.
Case, if you was to get to DC, what type of legislation would you like to see introduced, or would you sponsor?
I mean, I think the number one thing that I'm concerned about is our national debt. And it doesn't seem like we're putting an end to it. It seems like no matter what, we continue to spend more money. And so, legislation I would like to see specifically would be a balanced budget amendment. But more importantly, I just think we need people that are willing to say no, people that are not willing to continue to send the hard earned taxpayer dollars to fund these things that the Americans don't need or that are actually hurting us in the long run.
Um, Case, you're a younger dude. I can remember when the national debt was like 2 trillion, it wasn't that long ago, it seems to me, was like $2 trillion. Now it's $37 trillion. Are you concerned that we could be facing like a national debt crisis, insolvency, here in the not so distant future?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and that's the thing. People that try to advocate for structural reforms that are actually going to affect bring our spending down, they say those people are people on the left or maybe even some conservatives nowadays say that, oh, you're trying to take away my stuff. And everybody likes free stuff. But at the end of the day, the stuff runs out because nothing is free. And so if we don't put a stop to this, I'm the only person that's trying to protect people's retirements, protect Medicare, protect Social Security, because I do think that in the next 10 to 15 years, we will become insolvent and people will have to take a haircut overnight without being able to prepare. And so, the folks that are actually advocating for reducing spending and pulling back on some of the entitlements and other things that we continue to send money into just aimlessly with no regard for the future, people that are advocating for that, they're the only people that are actually trying to make sure that, yes, it's going to be gradual and yes, we're going to see some changes, but at least people can prepare, because otherwise, like I said, it's going to happen overnight and it's going to be very abrupt.
Case, do you have any idea on how you would go about balancing the budget, which areas you would tackle?
I mean, right now, I think everything's on the table, but I think it would be really naive to not talk about entitlement programs. I mean, whenever we look at the budget, I mean, $4 trillion is going towards entitlements. That is the biggest piece of the pie. And so, yes, we already saw with Doge how they found all the waste, fraud, and abuse. It was 190 billion. I mean, that's just a drop in the bucket. And yes, we need to always hit the low-hanging fruit first. We need to stop the foreign aid. We need to stop all this senseless stuff that these crazy DEI studies that we're conducting in the United States and abroad. All of that, that's low-hanging fruit. That needs to stop. But that is not the largest piece of the pie here. And so, yes, address that first, see where the cards fall. But then at some point, I do think that we're going to need to see some structural changes in regards to our entitlements.
The big elephant in the room at the moment is that, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I mean, Charlie pretty much from, like time he was 18, was out speaking, debating, to young people. That was, he founded Turning Point USA, and his focus was on, reaching young people, and explaining conservatism to them. As a younger person, how are you affected by the death of Charlie Kirk? I mean, he's basically assassinated just for what he said.
Right. I'm tremendously. I will say that I'm 25 years old. I'm a part of Generation Z. Charlie Kirk was someone that inspired me, and I think inspired a lot of people in our generation, not only for several reasons, right? His faith in God, I think his outspoken faith in Jesus Christ, I think that's why he was murdered. But also, too, just the fact that he was a young person and getting involved in politics and urging young people to get involved as well. I think that it hits different for younger folks. And I'm not going to say that anyone older than me doesn't care. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm just saying I think I have a different perspective as being someone that grew up to see someone that's almost a peer. I mean, 31 years old. He's a little bit older than I am. But also at the same time, he was someone that I could look to and aspire towards, as far as not necessarily on every policy and thing. We didn't agree on every policy viewpoint, but it was someone that gave the younger generation a voice. And so it really hit close to home for me. And two, being the father of two young daughters myself, I know he's got two young kids and a wife. I was living out the things that he was practicing and preaching, as far as getting married young, starting a family, loving the Lord, getting involved in politics, and telling young people that you will see benefits from doing these things. And I was living that out. And I'm not saying that he was the sole person telling me that, and he was the only reason why I did that, but he was the biggest advocate and outspoken person for those things, I think, especially for our generation and in the political sphere. And so I was seeing the truth in his message lived out in my own life. And so it really hit close to home for me. And my first thought was obviously his children and his wife. And I can't imagine my daughters not having a dad to come home to, or even worse yet. I mean, his son was so young. I think he was just over a year old from what I understand. I mean, he won't even have a memory of his father, and he'll have to live through pictures and stories and things like that. It's horrible.
Okay, so just talking about our debt a while ago, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, under the Biden administration, we were spending 1.5% of our federal budget each year. Would you support giving more aid to Ukraine, or do you have an idea of how we should go about stopping this war, or if we can stop it?
No, I mean, I think that obviously diplomacy and, getting these countries to talk with one another is obviously going to be the best course of action. But I would be absolutely opposed to sending foreign aid to anyone, really. I mean, that's across the board, full stop, no foreign aid. I mean, we've just saw last week on September the 10th that with the NDAA, there were amendments proposed to stop assistance to Ukraine, to stop military assistance to Taiwan, and also to stop sending money for humanitarian disaster relief overseas. My opponent, Representative Gary Palmer, voted to keep funding all of those things. And so, I mean, even just to put that in perspective, Representative Moore, he voted against those things. That is someone that a lot of people would say is one of the most conservative members in the Alabama delegation. Him and Palmer were voting separately. Palmer has strayed from the conservative values that he claimed to represent. He came into this arena part of the Tea Party movement, the anti-establishment candidate that was going to push back against the GOP establishment, and that has strayed. I think the longer he stayed in Congress, he's become beholden to the GOP establishment in order to keep his position, and I think now he just toes the line and does whatever they tell him to do, and we're seeing that with his votes. The American people and the people of Alabama do not want their earned money, and this is the thing that I try to stress to folks. It's your money. Whenever you go to work, you work a full 8 hours. You don't get that full 8-hour pay, right? The government takes a cut of it. But at least we could have some peace if they're using it for things that are going to better the life of Americans and the better the life of the people here in Alabama. But instead, you're going to work 8 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week, however many days a year. The government is taking their cut and sending it to Ukraine, sending it to the Taiwanese military, and sending it to humanitarian disaster relief projects. I mean, do you really think that that's what that money is getting used for overseas? Absolutely not. And I find it abhorrent and just completely a slap in the face to the people of Alabama that Representative Palmer would continue, we would vote to continue sending money to those things, even with the amendment laid out on the table. It wasn't even in the context of a bigger bill. A lot of times these politicians, they'll make excuses and say, well, there was a pay raise for soldiers in the bill, I had to vote for it. That wasn't even this case. These were standalone amendments, and he voted specifically to continue sending money for these things.
Case, we could make an argument whether we should have funded Ukraine's war with Russia, but we did. And we've tried to, under President Trump, we've tried to negotiate a ceasefire or a settlement, and Putin has rebuffed our our proposals. If we didn't continue sending aid to Ukraine at this point, wouldn't that just be rewarding the dictator for his aggressive, actions against Ukraine?
Well, let me
I mean,
say this.
now that we're committed, aren't we committed until this thing ends?
No, I completely disagree. I mean, it's like what former presidential candidate and Congressman Ron Paul said, we just marched in and we can just march out. And it's the same way with this money. We just started sending money. We can just stop sending it. We're not obligated in any way, shape, or form. I think our number one obligation is to the United States of America and the American people. And so I think we can just stop that cold turkey. But speaking about Russia and Ukraine, I don't think it's rewarding anything. I mean, we've seen in years past, how did the United States react with the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Whenever we're entertaining letting Ukraine join NATO, whenever you look at the history of NATO and what it was founded on, I can understand how Russia would be weary and how Russia would feel threatened. And so we have to look at everything from the 5,000-foot view, from the full picture. And I'm not saying I condone anything that Russia is doing. Obviously, war is bad, killing is bad, and the war needs to stop. But I don't think that has anything to do with the American people.
Chase, are you concerned that we've seen what was last week was it in Beijing where or Xi, Putin and oh God, the North Korean guy, I can't think of his name. Are you concerned that could be a new axis of evil?
As far as them coalescing and forming some sort of coalition?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we never want adversaries to be driven closer to one another. But, I think that we've almost shot ourselves in the foot whenever we continue to put sanctions on Russia. The American dollar is the world's currency. And whenever we sanction Russia and they can't do business with the American dollar, all we're doing is forcing them to figure out ways to do business otherwise. And so I honestly think that is what is causing these countries to coalesce around a hatred of America, maybe not even a hatred, but just a necessity to form alliances elsewhere because we're cutting them off to things that were vital for their economy. And now they're gaining independence, separate from us in ways that they hadn't been forced to before.
Case, you said we should cut Ukraine off. If we're going to we're not getting more aid. If Russia beats you, you're on your own. Are you committed to go to war with Russia if they come across that Polish border? Because they are a member of NATO.
Right. I mean, I think that we should get out of NATO, but while we're in NATO, obviously we have an obligation there. And if they were to go to war with Poland, the American military would be obligated in regards to the alliances that we have. So I just think that that's a fact of the way things are right now and the treaties that we have and the alliances that we have. I mean, that's just a fact, I think.
Do you support more of an isolationist type approach for the United States?
I wouldn't necessarily call it isolationist. I would call it America first. But yes, I think that we should really be focused. And no, I wouldn't say isolationist in the sense that I think that we should still continue to do trade with other countries and continue to work with them in a diplomatic way. But I don't think that we should be the world's police by any way, shape, or form.
Getting on a different track, I guess because of the tariffs and China refusing to buy American grain, uh, corn price recently hit down, in the cash market down to 381 a bushel. I
Right.
mean, it costs like $5 a bushel to plant this stuff. Um, soybeans, I think I saw them at 747 here very recently. Are you concerned that we could be walking into a massive farm economy crash here just within weeks where
Yeah.
farms just fail?
Yes, and just an economy crash in general. I mean, we're seeing now inflation is still above the target rate, and I'm not on board with the Federal Reserve. I think that they should be abolished personally, but their target rate is 2% inflation. Right now, we're sitting I think around 2.7, 2.8% inflation, but now we're talking about cutting rates. And so, if we're going to cut rates while inflation is still above the target rate there, I mean, that's going to cause inflation to ramp back up. That's going to hurt the economy. In addition to these tariffs, which they're a tax. That's what they are. That's not the conservative line. That has never been the conservative line. Um, yes, I think that the economy is going to suffer.
Okay, sure. Hitting on a lot of Ron Paul's talking points. Old guys like me and Brandon, we can remember when he ran for president in '88. How did you get turned on to Dr. Paul?
Not really, I guess, Dr. Paul, but anybody in the liberty movement, specifically Rand Paul, Ron Paul, Justin Amash, Thomas Massey. I just think that whenever I see what they're saying and the talking points that they have, it truly is just America first. And I think the American people are tired of being last, or not even last, but they're tired of being second or third on the totem pole. And I think it's time that the American people take the utmost priority. I think that it's time for the people of Alabama to be the top of the totem pole on the things that our government is working for. And so it just makes sense to me, really.
Um, this sort of got, because of the Kirk assassination, other issues that came up. The French government just collapsed. They had a center left, far left coalition government that, the prime minister was trying to put in some austerity packages to try to get them where their budget would sort of balance. And and the reps said no. So, are you scared that the French economy, if it collapses, which is what they were trying to fight off, but couldn't keep the political support to do it, that could be the domino that, affects other countries like Spain and Britain and, ultimately lead to a domino effect that would even affect the US economy?
I mean, I don't personally think it would affect the U.S. economy in a serious way. I think anytime you have an economy collapse, if it's someone we're doing trade with, that's going to affect things in a way. But I don't think that the French government collapsing is necessarily going to have any lasting or big impact on the American economy specifically.
Okay, here a couple years ago, we seen that Roe v. Wade got overturned and sent back to the states. Um, would you support it staying at the states, or do you think there should be a federal ban on abortion?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I am one of the biggest supporters, if not the biggest supporter, of federalism. I think that states should have autonomy to do the things that they see fit. But it's specifically to the case of abortion. I think that any abortion is a violation of the 14th Amendment. So I do think that that is unduly ending a life without due process. So in that instance, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And so I don't think that any state should be allowed to allow murder. And so, yes, I would absolutely be in favor of abortion being banned at the federal level. And I don't think that that would overstep on states' rights either.
Oh, along those same lines, Case, the Constitution gives me a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And Alabama sort of lets us do what we want to there. There's other states like New York where, having a gun in my car, even with my Alabama constitutional, I mean, you know, even though I have an Alabama concealed carry permit, in addition to my U.S. constitutional right, I would get arrested in the state of New York if I drove across the line and an officer saw the gun that sits in the drawer there.
Right.
Do we need national reciprocity where concealed carriers in Alabama or Ohio can, their rights extend even when they cross the state line?
I would absolutely be in favor of that. But I think more importantly, we need all states to honor the Constitution. And the Second Amendment is clear that it shall not be infringed. And so I think that any of these laws in any of the states are completely unconstitutional. And so I would be in favor of constitutional carry at the federal level because once again, that's not something I think would be overstepping states' rights. I think it would just be honoring the Constitution. But to your point, I would be in favor of reciprocity between states because I do think that that is a step in the right direction.
Okay, so we seen a few days ago the footage of that Ukrainian immigrant brutally murdered on the subway, and the left is out here making the murderer a victim, talking about his mental illness. Is
Not
mental
the
illness
victim,
really,
the perpetrator.
yeah, sorry, the perpetrator. Is mental illness, is that a problem, or are people getting so fried on drugs that that's creating their mental illness? I mean, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for every case. Definitely, mental illness is real. I don't know this individual's history as far as drug use goes, but I don't think that mental illness is an excuse to be soft on crime or to give someone a lighter sentence in a scenario like this. It is extremely tragic, and it should not have happened. And this person should have been locked up a long time ago. We have to stop being soft on crime. We have to put perpetrators away. We have to have judges that are competent and that don't allow repeat offenders back out on the streets, endangering American citizens.
Case along those same lines, we had a shooting of a Catholic church and we killed a whole bunch of little children, that were just at a morning mass by some lunatic that, was a transsexual. We've had several of these where these people that are hyped up on all these hormones and puberty blockers have had these weird surgeries done. Do we need a national ban on these experimental hormone treatments and puberty blockers and these weird surgeries? Because apparently, you take somebody who already had a mental illness when they think they want to be another gender, and then you give them a whole bunch of steroid hormones at levels that would be illegal to give a steer to. It creates, I think it creates some of these problems that we have. What is your view?
Yeah, I think 100% that it is cruel and harmful for to anyone, whether it be the parents, the doctors, whoever it may be, to allow these children to take the life-altering drugs. I think that that is endangering them and it is causing harm to them. And so for that reason, I do think it should be illegal, just in the way it's illegal to harm anyone. 100%. I think that, but more importantly, I think that we're dealing with not something that can be fixed with the legislation. As far as, yes, we can make certain things illegal. Yes, we can stop surgeries. We can put a stop to some of these things, but it's not going to stop the problem that we have as far as the mental state that our people are in some scenarios. I think that's not something that can be affected at the government level. I just want to say that I think all people need to get into the Word of God, need to love their families, need to read the Bible. And I think that when they return to Jesus, that we will see a revival in this country and we will see some of these mental health crises like we were talking about earlier will resolve in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, so earlier you was talking about going to Washington and doing your job and returning. Would you commit to serving so many terms? And if so, how many?
Yeah, absolutely. I would commit to serving 8 years, 4 terms. I think that's plenty. I think for the U.S. House of Representatives, personally, that's where I think that we should have a term limits in that regard. But term limits, no term limits. I think that 4 years, or sorry, 8 years in the House is sufficient to get you. You could serve through 2 administrations if you were to just serve 8 years. I think that is plenty to get the job done. I think anything after that is you're just going to be staying to look for new ideas and new initiatives, and you're going to end up growing government. And I think that's completely contrary to the conservative movement, which is supposed to be limited government and citizen-led leadership.
Case, we talked a little bit about Taiwan earlier. If China decides to go into Taiwan, should we fight to the death to defend Taiwan's right to be, an independent, island country out there?
No, I mean, like I said, I would be opposed to foreign aid across the board. And so I don't think that we should be sending troops. I don't think we should be sending money. I think that we should worry about the American people, honestly. And I think that it's just a fact of life. Other countries are going to war and they're going to have conflicts. And I don't think that it is at the best interest of the American people and the American government to get involved in every single scenario.
Okay, so what do you think? I know you talked about the national debt was the greatest threat. What do you think's the second? I mean, for years, we had the southern border. Seems like the president's got that taken care of. I mean, do you think it's something foreign or domestic?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that, like you just talked about, immigration is obviously a very big issue. But for me personally, the biggest threat that I see opposed to or second to our national debt is erosion of individual liberty. I think that too often, I mean, just take, for example, we were talking about trans people and the shootings, and now you're seeing people on the right calling for sweeping gun bans. I think that we need to tread lightly. I think that we need to make sure we toe the conservative line, no matter who's in charge, no matter what the administration is, as far as limited government. Just because it's a good idea in theory and something that we would like to see doesn't mean that it's not going to be used against us in the future. And so I think the second most important thing for me is the erosion of individual liberty of the American citizens. And we need to make sure that government power is reined in and that more power is given back to local governments.
Case, the federal government treats marijuana as a Schedule One drug like heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine or fentanyl. But we look the other way and we sort of allow California and Colorado to, have recreational marijuana. And I think Florida's got that now too. And in like 38 states, including Alabama, have some sort of medical cannabis. Is it time to reschedule marijuana, where it's not, a federally illegal?
I think that the federal government should get out of the drug business altogether. I think what states decide to do should be up to them. I think that, Alabama will decide what they want best and California will decide what they want best. And if you walk down the street and you hate the smell of weed, then you probably need to move out of California. But I don't think that, once again, that's what I was talking about with the erosion of states' autonomy and individual liberty. I think that when we allow the government that much power to be able to control what substances are legal or illegal, I think that just overrides the state's wills and their rights. And so I would be on board with descheduling all of these substances and allowing states to decide whether or not they should be controlled substances or not.
Okay, so is the president sending troops into cities? Is that overriding state will?
Yeah, I'm not on board with that. I do think, once again, that's setting a bad precedent. You can make the case that in DC that it's different. They're under congressional authority over there. But I do think that if a government, especially, I mean, we're not talking about looting and riot. We're just talking about crime levels are high. I don't think that is justification to send in the National Guard or the military on citizen populations. Oh, they're not citizens, they're criminals. That's what I hear a lot. Okay, that is not something that is in line with the Constitution. And if we claim to be conservatives, if we claim to be Republicans, we have to hold the Constitution in high regard. these left cities, these left-leaning cities, with their crime, where their crime is rampant, eventually it will get to a breaking point where people will leave or they will start voting for conservative people. But I don't think the solution is to give the federal government more power. I don't think that's ever the solution.
Uh, you know, we've got the budget deficit. You'd like to decrease the deficit and maybe at some point get to where we have a balanced budget. Um, Probably the biggest driver of the budget when you look at it outside of interest on the debt, which we can't control, is what we're spending on Medicare, what we're spending on Medicaid, what we're spending on Obamacare subsidies. Uh, you're in the medical field. Are you concerned that if we cut federal spending in these federal health programs, that it's going to adversely affect the health of the American people, and more specifically, the health of the healthcare sector itself financially?
Not necessarily. I think that we can do some things in regards to deregulation, as far as reimbursement for nurse practitioners, reimbursement for home health pay, allowing more telemedicine visits, things like that. That type of deregulation, I think that's going to help people have more access to care. But also, too, I think that we can all agree that the government is terrible at innovation. The government is terrible at money management. So I don't know why we've become conditioned to think that they are managing our healthcare well and that the solution is to dump more money into it and they're going to do a better job. I think that whenever we have more free market solutions and we have more competition, that healthcare will thrive and that patients will thrive. And so I don't think the solution, once again, is giving the government more power.
This is the president's policy of picking up people, and I mean these illegal immigrants, and sending them to El Salvador, wherever, without due process. Is that the correct thing to do?
I will say regarding ICE and regarding these, we need mass deportations. I just want to say that up front. I would have to get into the nitty gritty of people's constitutional rights, but I do think that governments make mistakes, people make mistakes, and we have to tread lightly and make sure that we are not violating people's rights. I mean, just for example, whenever we sent the individual, once again, an illegal citizen, sent him to a country by accident. And that's not to say that he needed to stay in America by any way, shape, or form. But mistakes happen, so we have to make sure that we're not acting too swiftly in a way that is overriding people's rights. But I do think that if you're here illegally, you broke the law, you need to go. We need mass deportations across the board.
Case, we recently had a deal where we attacked and sank a Venezuelan boat that we thought was carrying narcotics to the U.S. The government there in Venezuela has increasingly become a narco state where, they get cocaine and whatever from all of South America and ship it to the United States. And we've got criminal gangs from Venezuela operating in the U.S. After Hugo Chavez won, there hasn't been an honest election in Venezuela since then. Are we getting at a point where we just have to send the Marines into Venezuela? Or would you be in favor of that if we could show where, narco gangs in Venezuela were responsible for the deaths of Americans on the streets due to drugs and drug trafficking?
I mean, obviously, I'm opposed to other countries coming here illegally, bringing illegal substances across our borders. But I think that's what we have the Coast Guard for, to interdict these individuals, to stop them, to arrest them. And so, yes, in that regard, I think it needs to stop.
Okay, so let me see what you think on this right here. Do you think there's a time that the U.S. should launch a preemptive strike, like what took place in Iran?
Like what Israel did?
No, like
No,
when we
what we
sent
did
the
with the B-2 bombers.
Oh, yes. Um, No, I don't agree with that necessarily. I'm not privy to the intel that a lot of the people in the higher up positions were privy to. But once again, I don't think that the United States of America was at risk. I think that common sense can tell us that Iran does not have any uh, long range missiles that can reach the U.S. And I'm not sure, how do we know? Like I said, I don't know what type of intel they had. Maybe they had very valid info that um, Iran was about to strike Israel. I'm not sure. But once again, I think that we need to stop with the overseas business. I think that we need to focus on America.
Along those same lines, Israel is a major purchaser of U.S. arms and equipment, Patriot missiles, Lancer missiles, the Iron Dome. There's a lot of people here employed in Alabama, basically to keep Israel armed to the teeth and defended. Are you for cutting that business out? Or are you making an exception for Israel in the foreign aid deal?
No, I'm not making an exception for Israel in the foreign aid. It's nothing specific against Israel. I do think that we do a lot of business with them, so a lot of people could see it as that, but it's not. It's really across the board. No foreign aid. Focus on America. We need to stop putting other countries ahead of the interests of American citizens.
Cash, you said you supported the United States getting out of NATO. Do you think the United States should get out of the UN as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. More than NATO, but both.
Huh.
I do want to say, I think, the United Nations typically works against the interests of the United States, specifically in the agendas that they push. So I think it's absurd that we continue to remain a part of the UN.
We've got, we've gotten threats from North Korea, from, other countries, China, Russia. Do we need our own Iron Dome missile defense system where if you shoot a missile at the US, we have a missile to shoot your missile down?
I just don't think we can afford it right now. I mean, we're seeing already we're getting the Golden Dome started, and it's going to be umpteen $1 billion. I just don't think that's something we can afford. I think we have a very strong military. I think that we have a very strategically placed country. I don't think that's necessarily something that we should be spending money on right now. Maybe if we had a surplus or we had, a lot more money than we do, sure, why not? I'm all for defending the homeland. But right now, I don't think that should necessarily be at the forefront of our agenda.
Case, do you think we should bring our troops home from the Middle East, Europe, and South Korea?
Yeah, I don't think that we should be having standing soldiers in other countries. I think that we should bring them home, stay in the United States, and once again, we should be defending the homeland. I don't think that we should be having a presence overseas at all times.
Um, 60 years ago, there was a series of Supreme Court decisions that kicked prayer out of schools, that banned Bibles, instruction in the Bible. I mean, even like nativity scenes, we can have a Santa Claus decorated all over the place, but you can't have the baby Jesus at Christmas time. Has that led to a moral decline in this country? The rise of the LGBTQ plus movement, abortion, uh, unwed mothers, the whole 9 yards, with immorality and increase in depression and suicides. Do we need to rethink all that and just bring Jesus and the Bible and the Ten Commandments back into our schools?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that we have the First Amendment, so I don't think that the government should be instituting a religion in any way, shape, or form. But I do think it is important to remember that this country was founded on Christian principles. It was founded by Christian men, and we would not have the liberties and the freedoms and the country that we have today if it were not for those biblical principles. But I will say that, that's kind of a big question, and I'm going to try to tackle it. I think that the number one thing is that we have apathy in the home, and I think it really has been a result of reliance on the church in a certain way, and I'll get into that, but a reliance on the government. I think that parents need to remember that they have the responsibility to raise their children in a godly way, teaching them right from wrong, telling them to get married young, to start families, and to spread the gospel. And I think that too often we're seeing families just saying, "Oh, well, they'll learn this in school, or they'll learn this in Sunday school," and it's just too much apathy. And I think that once again, that's not something that you can fix with legislation, but it is something that you can fix in speaking out, inspiring other people to return to the gospel. And I think that the more we do that, the less of a decline that we will see in this country.
Case, I think that's all I've got for you. I don't know if Brandon's got anything else.
Maybe one, again, we've got massive deficits, and another item outside of healthcare and defense. We have really high amounts of food support, supplemental nutrition assistance. I think you used to call that food stamps back in the day. Do we need to limit what you can purchase with that, or maybe where you can't have sodas and sugar snack drinks and cookies and potato chips with our SNAP dollars, maybe decrease the SNAP dollars?
Yeah, 100%. Whenever you rely on government funding, there's always going to be strings attached. And so if you're going to accept government money, you're going to be um, beholden to whatever the government says you can use that money for. And so, I don't think that we should be subsidizing a healthcare crisis as far as we're seeing, with our children and with regards to obesity, and even to an older population. That is, once again, that's what all of our money is going to, is healthcare. And that's because we have such an unhealthy population. And so I don't think the government should be in the business of subsidizing that. So if you're going to take federal money, if you're going to take government money, then you can only use it for what they say.
Brandon, do
You
you have any
back,
other
Christopher?
questions? Yeah, do
No,
you have any other
I'm
questions
done.
for him?
Well,
Okay,
if you don't
Case,
mind, I want to say one more thing.
yeah, absolutely.
In the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, we touched on earlier, um, to anyone watching, to anyone listening, I want to say, pour into young people, to encourage young people to get involved, because their seat at the table is coming, and the older generation will pass away. And at some point, my generation, Generation Z, and the generation after me, my kids' generation, Generation Alpha, they will be stepping up to the plate, and they will have a say-so in the direction of this country. And so we need to make sure that we're pouring into young people and giving them a seat at the table and allowing them to learn from us and from the older generation, and making sure that we are continuing to push forward with conservative values and Christian values so that this country can continue to thrive.
Is that all, Case? Or anything else you'd like to add to this?
That's pretty much all I've got.
Well, thanks so much, man. I'll get this loaded up this afternoon, and I'll post it in the groups, and I'll tag you in it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on, Case.
Take care.